In addition to obstacles of school, maybe the way you look, there's sometimes obstacles of that somebody has power. And when I was a kid, I didn't know what power was because you have an unbounded amount of energy and nobody's in your way. You know what consequences are when your dad or mom's chasing you around, but power was a foreign concept to me. And there are obstacles presented by power. And I'll give you an example. I was in college and I was working on a union job. And in those days, you'd go to the union hall, and I got a union card because it paid better in New York than did any other job. And you'd go to the union hall and you'd sit on the floor. And the BA, which means business administrator of the union, would walk around and he'd point at people. And those are the people that got a job and got to work. If he didn't point at you, you didn't go to work. So I happened to be lucky in that I knew a guy who was a union representative, and he'd whisper to the BA, give that kid a job because he needs money for college. So he would pick me. And I did it several years in a row. Well, one year I went back, they gave me a job that was harder than I ever could imagine doing. And I was thinking, I'm a student, I'm not a construction worker, this is crazy. So I went to the union hall and I said to this BA, sir, Ronnie was his name, Ronnie, I can go paint a house with one of my buddies and we can get a couple of $100 over the next few weeks. I'm not so sure that this job is the right one for me. I think I'd rather do that because this job was hard. And he said to me, Jim, do whatever you think is right. So I left that job and I went and painted the house, and 2 weeks later I came back, I sat on the floor in the union hall, he went around, he skipped over me, where he always used to pick me. He kept skipping over me. Finally, I needed to work because I needed to pay for college. He came back to me, I went up to him one day and I finally said, Ronnie, what's going on? You've always given me a job. And he said, Jim, you had a job. I gave you a job. You didn't want it. I said, Ronnie, you said to me, do what I think is right. And he said, that's the problem. You did what you thought was right. You didn't do what I thought was right. And my eyes got big and I realized I want a piece of that power. Okay, I want a piece of that. Now, his problem, in my book, was his power emanated from position. It didn't emanate from relationship. And that's a bad spot to be in if the only way you have power is based upon position. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Let me give you another example of obstacles. I went to law school. I thought I was pretty smart. Everybody in law school thinks they're smart. So we had exams at the end of the first semester, and I just wrote out the answers to all the essays. And then they post your grades by number. Thankfully, it wasn't by name. I had 4 D's and an F. And I thought, I'm packing my bags. This is not for me. So I ran into a fellow who was a upperclassman. He was a third-year student. Law school's 3 years. And he knew I was kind of down in the mouth about it. He said, Jim, you know what the problem is? You're smart, but you don't know the rules of the game. You're going to have essays. Doesn't matter what the question is. It doesn't matter what the facts are. Just make sure you spit out a fixed paragraph that you've memorized in your head that deals with that issue. So, for example, in the world of contracts in law school, you have to figure out whether there's a contract in an essay, and then who has rights under that contract, and so forth. And he said, just memorize the paragraph. I still know it today, 33, 34 years later. Ever since the case of Lawrence versus Fox, the courts have recognized assignments of contracts. Assignments can be for consideration, or assignments can be gratuitous. In some cases, and then it just kept going. It didn't matter what the facts were. He said, always put that paragraph first whenever you see anything about an assignment. He said, if you ever see anything about a such and such, memorize a paragraph and put that paragraph. And I did that, and I learned the rules. I learned what that society of law school expected from me, and I was 7th in my class at the end of the year. I was the same guy before, I just figured out the rules. So there's obstacles. Obstacles are not knowing the rules. You've got to figure out what the rules are in your own little society, whatever it may be. The office you're in, the school you're in, whatever it is. There's obstacles of the way you look. There's obstacles of where you went to school. There's obstacles if somebody has power and they're in your way. But my point on all that is that those obstacles are really just opportunities. And that's really been my life. They're opportunities. You deal with them and then you say, I got it now. And you move to the next circumstance. So what else is there in terms of what you might do to try to get to a goal line of some kind of business success, other than knowing there's obstacles and knowing who you are and where you came from? Well, here's my list at least. One thing for absolute sure, you have to get an education. You have got to graduate from this school. I want to read you something. This is from the USA Today just a few weeks ago, March 17th. A high school senior who was not admitted to his or her preferred college should not foresee a lifetime of failure. Here's the financial big picture. If you are on track to graduate from any U.S. college, you already have won. According to the U.S. Census, workers 18 and older who hold a bachelor's degree earned an average of $56,788 in 2006, more than 82% higher than those than the earnings by those with only a high school diploma. So one thing to get to where you want to be certainly is you got to get an education. You got to graduate. A second thing, you better know how to speak and write English well. Because if you don't, people disregard you after a while. That's the second thing. The third is you have to be passionate, in my opinion. People who are not passionate can confuse other emotions. Passion is good in your chosen profession. Fourth, I believe you have to be dynamic. It doesn't mean necessarily being aggressive. It means being bold. It means go ahead. Particularly when you're young, you have nothing to lose. Just go ahead. You have to next perform and you have to execute. You know what that really translates to? It translates to working hard. And that's part of performance. It's not wrong to be the last one to leave the office. Performing and executing also means making decisions. So be decisive, make a decision, and in that decision making, ask yourself the questions that you feel like you have to answer. Then make the decision. And if you need data, get the data, but know the questions first. Don't just get data, because I think you get lost in the information. The last thing I think that you need is relationship. What I mean by that is you build your power from relationships. And that trust builds up from relationship. Now I want to say something which I hope you don't take wrong, and that is that I think you need to be strategic in relationship, not generous. And what I mean by that is you just can't have relationship in your life where you're working and putting in the time to get ahead with everybody around you. You have to be strategic. Where are you going to invest your time to establish relationship? Because it's too difficult time-wise to be generous in establishing relationship, in my opinion. So where does this all get you? Well, I'll tell you one thing, that as a young lawyer I had sort of a mantra that I always followed, which was, I'm the lawyer's not me. And what I meant by that to myself was that I'm not who I am because of my position. I'm not someone who got poured into a mold and then that mold said lawyer all around it, and then I came out and that was me. Instead, I'm the guy who became the lawyer, not put the lawyer garb on. And I'm not going to change. I said that from when I started practicing law. I'm just going to be the same person. So be the same person as you are, and don't take on the armor of whatever you decide to be and think you have to be a certain way. Be yourself. I'm the lawyer. Say to yourself, I'm the whatever you are, and it's not that that profession is you. So with all that said, let me conclude by saying, if I get through to just one of you, then this time will all have been worth it. I'll ask you a simple question. Will it be you that I get through to? I hope so.